Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I feel like I get progressively lazier each time I do this. I think it used to matter to me what I was wearing on screen, and that has slowly faded away. In any case, here we are. We actually have kind of a lot of questions today, so I won't spend too much time on babbling. She says, babbling. Remember that the spell discussion is available to you. It was a conversation between myself and Angela Gualtieri, so feel free to check that out. If you're still reading, that's fine. But yeah, hopefully you're enjoying Mexican Gothic. It's very much appropriate for the season, I think. I also just watched The Witches, which was very enjoyable. I actually really love Anne Hathaway. I may have said this before, that I don't really understand why people went through a phase of not liking her. But I love her in the villain role. Watching her with Stanley Tucci was great. Let's see, I'm watching Rebecca today, so TBD on my thoughts on that. A reminder that the Ask Me Anything that I'm doing with the Department of Fanfiction is starting on Friday. So this is starting Olivie Ween. Someone called it Olivie Ween, and I thought that was a great name, which is not really anything. But so I will be available on Discord, answering anything, and I will also probably be on Tumblr as well. I'm going to be doing my usual Halloween watch of Steel Magnolias on Halloween, so you can join me for that. I'll probably be on Tumblr or something, just around. Yeah, and then I think we might do, for those of you who might remember years ago when I did the Olivie sleepover event or whatever, I just reblogged a bunch of random questions and was just around. So anyway, that will be this weekend. Also this week I will be running the giveaway on Instagram for La Petite More, and the answer you are looking for is yes. So keep an eye on that if you were interested. I have a glass of water. Doing so well with hydration. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so this question we've heard versions of before. We're kind of getting to the point where I've heard versions of almost every writing question. But yeah, so hi, do you have any tips on how to make your audience feel your story? I always admire the authors like you and their stories that make me feel like I'm the character, or like I can feel the happiest moments, but above all, the darkest moments. Thank you for your advice. So I think this is actually a two-part question. One part is characterization, which is rooted a lot in empathy and how you design your character. And the thing I always say for that is that you want people to at least understand what's going through your character's head, which means that you almost have to mimic their own train of thought. So imagining how other people would feel in this position, or really it's more like convincing the audience to imagine how they would feel if they were in this position, which is in some sense universal, that, we would all feel fear a certain way. You were talking about the darkest moments, sadness. We would all feel, betrayal, jealousy. So one of the things I've always said is important is that when you're writing, you want to bring things back, you root them in your own experience. You never want to write something that feels so out of touch. Even if it's something very sensationalized, one thing that comes up in fan fiction all the time is a very gruesome emotional torture or physical torture. Actually, yeah, in fan fiction it's more often a magical torture sort of situation. People really lean into that, and you can tell who's good at it and who's not by how what they actually focus on. You don't want to focus on the physical pain. Not a lot of people have been in such severe physical pain that they understand what this feels like. You kind of want to more focus on something that might, the sense of fear, the sense of not knowing what's coming next. That's what people relate to. So it's just it's really how you frame situations to make them relatable to the person who's reading. Everyone has been afraid of something or of someone or of some unknown outcome. Everyone has been concerned for someone else's safety. It's really just about the ways that you're able to make it seem familiar to your audience. And sometimes that means stepping back on the sensationalized aspects. Sometimes it means the character just goes into another headspace where they're just thinking about everything that has happened, and that can be much more, traumatic. I don't want to... Talking about the dark scenes is always hard, but I've noticed that that's something where you can really tell where someone has done it well or done it not very well. And it usually comes back to, are they making it feel like something that could conceivably have happened to the audience? Because otherwise there's always going to be a disconnect of like, we're not watching this on a screen. We can't see pain and we can't hear it. We have to only connect it to what we are feeling. Same with, love and romance and stuff. All those happy feelings too, you have to bring that back to something that the audience can feel. That's harder to give an example of where things are distant, but yeah. Another thing I talk a lot about is sensory research. So things are always going to be weird to the audience if something is described incorrectly. Sometimes, this is another thing I see a lot, where like blood is described wrong. Blood is not really, I always use this example, and I think it's just because I read one scene in particular that someone had given me, and it wasn't a bad scene by any means, but you could just tell that there was a distance from reality to it, because they described the red as the red of the blood as being like scarlet or crimson, and and that's not what it looks like. So sometimes, I guess, I don't know, I guess this is very macabre of me to bring everything back to the goriest possible example. But yeah, you want to do the research about how things should look and feel. Or, if it's a place you've never been, you still need to figure out a way to make it seem plausible. The answer I always give with this is like, I've obviously never been in a gunfight. So I had to watch a lot of videos about what it sounds like when a gun is in the room. And like I focus on the little details of like what it sounds like when the safety is on or off, and how things are loaded. And it was stuff where like I would listen to it with my eyes closed, and just kind of get a feeling for like, what would it feel like if I were in the room? This can be really hard with places you've never been, especially if they're real places and other people have been there. So in that case, I always like to focus on like a fake aspect of a real place. Walking by a bakery and smelling some fresh baked bread is like something that is going to awaken the audience to that sensation. Distract them temporarily with something that they know is real, even if the place is not. I use a lot of like Google Maps Street View, like walking around as like an avatar on Google can be helpful to sort of orient yourself and kind of decide, or if it looks like a place that you've actually been, then you can kind of make a connection. But yeah, so it's not that you can't write something you've never felt or something you've never done. I mean, I was talking about how I was really worried about writing pregnancy because it was not something I had any familiarity with. So I just kind of talked to a lot of people about what they were feeling as they were going through it. And this is the thing, is like, you don't necessarily have to get right. Something like pregnancy especially is different for every woman anyway. So I could do research about what the symptoms would be, and there would still be some women who were like, well, it wasn't like that for me. But you do kind of run into the same, like, emotionally, what are you going through? I think I'm making the same point over and over, which is just always bring it back to like, how can everyone relate to this feeling? That uncertainty or hope or, fear, all of that stuff is what makes something feel real, because everyone has experienced it. So even if you are writing out of your comfort zone, you do have to bring it back to something that you know very well. And that will make the audience more likely to really be familiar with those feelings, which makes it feel more real. Hi, Olivie. In the spirit of you being our collective big sister, I was wondering if you had any advice on preparing for a career in college. I'm a sophomore and I've started applying to summer programs, but I keep panicking that I'm not doing enough, and plus I keep feeling like I need to pad my resume somehow, but I have no idea how, or at least how to sell myself better with the experience I already have. Any advice? Okay, well, you're a sophomore. You really don't have any experience. No offense to you. I mean, a lot of this answer is just going to be you're very young, and I think you're going to meet a lot of people who are not doing what they went to college for. You're listening to someone who is not doing what they went to college for. So the first thing I want to tell you is that I know you feel like you're running out of time, but you are not. Especially with the world as it is right now, there's just so much uncertainty that sort of to imagine that you should feel certain is kind of aiming for something that might not actually happen. A lot of what you might be feeling is anxiety that's related to a lot of the things going on right now. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But I do have some advice. So the thing is, you might change your mind about your career. I think it's always best to like, you want to gain as many skills as possible and as many experiences as possible. I think one of the best things you can do for yourself right now is find the environment that you want to work in, which is much harder than it sounds. Because I know when I was in college, what I wanted to do was like take all the classes on things that I wanted to do. And that's kind of going about it the wrong way. What you really want to do is like volunteer or do internships or, you know, find like extracurricular, co-curricular activities that put you in a position where you're sort of doing the job that you maybe want to do, because you might be surprised by how much you like or dislike the way that things actually work. This you cannot learn in the classroom. I didn't realize until I worked as an urban planner for 3 different city offices that I could not possibly do it. I learned that most planners have like such large projects that they'd never actually see them through. I talked to someone who worked on the same project for 45 years and then he just retired, and it was like a freeway extension that never happened. It still hasn't happened. But, you know, he did what he did his like daily thing, and he worked 9 to 5, and that was enough for him. And like, that wouldn't have been enough for me. And again, something you can't learn from a classroom. So you do have to put yourself in an atmosphere to see if you like it. You maybe want to try doing, if you're thinking about doing something that would be freelance, you want to try working freelance. You want to see if you like developing, seeking out clients and stuff. That might be something you actually hate. You want to see how you feel about what each job is actually like. Maybe you like having the freedom to choose your own hours, and that's something you want to consider. Or maybe you like coming to work and having someone like assign you a task. There's nothing wrong with whatever it is that you like, but you do need to find what that is, because the subject that you study is not really the same thing as the job that becomes your career. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then the flip side of that is you want to take classes and stuff that you find intellectually interesting. I mean, obviously there are some things that you're going to have to take, but don't waste your electives, you know, on things where you think you're just going to gain skills, because you don't really gain skills in the classroom. What you learn in the classroom is how to think differently, how to think in new ways, and to sort of have conversations that push the boundaries of what you think and be exposed to, you know, reading different things that are interesting to you, stuff like that. So it's the classroom is a very cerebral place, whereas like jobs, volunteer work, I cannot stress enough that volunteer work is like, you can really, because volunteering is something you can basically do differently each semester. You know, you could volunteer for a different place, like, you know, all the time. There's like weekend events and stuff. It puts you in a position of like finding yourself in a new atmosphere and seeing how you feel about that, and the actual practical day-to-day of what kinds of people work in this field. How do I actually feel about it? And you gain a lot of skills by actually doing things. So I would really focus on finding, you know, academic things that suit your interests and gaining the skills that you might use in basically any career. There are lots of overlaps between career abilities, because most likely you will, if not change entire careers, you might pivot within the industry, you might work a slightly different job, you start at a certain level and work up to a certain level. You need to also figure out what it looks like when people are working at upper levels, if like you want to work a career where you basically work your way up incrementally. Or do you just want to be doing your thing like right away? Yeah, so you're not behind. I remember feeling behind when I was a sophomore too, which was ridiculous. I wasn't at all. But yeah, I ended up, so I worked in a city planning office my sophomore year. My junior year, I worked for an art gallery, and they had hired me because they were looking for someone who was good with like community outreach, which was a skill that I had developed from working in the urban planning office the summer before. So I had a lot of experience with community forums, running them, and I also knew how to navigate City Hall, which is like weird to think of that as a skill, but it is very challenging. There are, you know, places you could work. Like I didn't actually think I wanted to work in the art world, but I did get a lot of exposure that way, and so learned a little bit more about what actually inspires me and what interests me. It turns out what interests me and inspires me is like very strange people, which you find in the art world. But yeah, I also volunteered at like a nonprofit where I played the flute for many years, so I taught like music I did like music tutoring and stuff on Friday afternoons. I did a lot of kind of weekend things. I was also in a sorority, so a lot of the stuff I did was community service for my sorority, just like opportunities. They were like, hey, do you guys want to go do this thing? And we would go do it together. And that's kind of how you get exposed to different organizations. You meet different alumni. I think the most important thing about college is not what you learn in the classroom, but the connections that you make. That also means that like you might want to sit in on classes that aren't related to like something you're interested in that aren't career related. I went to a school that has a very, very famous screenwriting seminar, and I wish now that I had taken it, but at the time I just like I was studying urban planning. I was in a hurry to get my master's and get out and like start my career that I never actually had, and I kick myself every day for not taking that like screenwriting class where I could have met people who could now help me as a writer. So that's the thing, is like you never really know how your life is going to turn out. So you really want to invest in your passions. I say that all the time. The things that you feel passionate about, even if it's not directly related to your academic track, you never know. You might meet someone who realizes that you have the skill set and the interest in something that's not something you had never considered before. College is all about diversifying your interests, your friend groups. Like, it's about being who you really are in all the many ways you are who you are. Studying things that really interest you. I once had a really, probably the best job interview I ever had, which was for a real estate job. One that I did not end up taking, that's not relevant. So I didn't have a lot of electives, but I spent them all on art history. And I specifically love Baroque art history. I love Baroque art. Whenever I travel, I really love looking at Baroque art, and it was great to know things about it, and even writing the papers about it was like so. I wrote a whole really long term paper about the social significance of the staircase in Baroque art that is still one of my favorite things I've ever done. So yeah, one of my best interviews was with a guy who happened to be really interested in art. That was one of his like side passions, and we just talked about art for like 30 minutes. And he's like, well, obviously I can see a lot about you from the way you talk about this thing. Because really, when it comes down to it, when you're competing with other people for a job within your industry, you guys all have the same training. You probably have similar skills. So the only thing to differentiate you is like, who are you as a person? And that's something that you kind of get to figure out in college. So don't underestimate how important that is. Well, the light has changed for no reason. Mr. Blake and I are moving next month, which I cannot wait for, because I basically have to rely on the light that comes through this window where there's a giant tree that is always different like sizes throughout the year. So anyway, hi Olivie. In the past year, I've made many significant life changes, breaking up with my long-term boyfriend, changing career paths. That's a lot of change. And as someone who has always known where I was going in life and already had a 10-year plan to back it up, I'm now feeling somewhat adrift. All these changes have been for the best, but as someone who has always planned, I'm worried that I'll never be able to achieve all my goals in a timely manner. How do you stay sane in the face of so much uncertainty? Okay, you're not going to accomplish all your goals in a timely manner. You know why? Because you're going to be alive for a really long time, and you're going to have new goals all the time, and they're always going to be just a little bit in front of you. Especially if you're the kind of person who has a 10-year plan. I had a 10-year plan, and you know what interrupted it? Mr. Blake. I've said this all the time. I said it in my wedding vows. I was like, I had a plan, I knew exactly where I was going, and then I met you, and now I have absolutely no idea what's coming next. And I get that that's terrifying. But the thing is, life is very long. And one of the things, Mr. Blake and I have both changed careers during the time that we've been married. And one of the things that I think is great that we've been able to like honestly say to each other is that without each other, we wouldn't even have known to take this turn, you know? Like we wouldn't have known to even try this thing. And it's funny because you think like, okay, well, I need to have certain things in order. Like I need to have my career and I need to have me figured out, and then I can meet someone and then we can start a family. And you think of all these things as being like stops along the way, but they're not. That is life. You're not going anywhere. That's the thing. For some reason, we project our lives like we're on this train to accomplishment, but you're not going to an accomplishment. Once you get it, then all you do is see beyond it. You're not, you can't live your life like you're trying to get to a destination on time, because it's not going to happen like that. I'm really sorry to tell you that it's not. And I really had this problem too. I really felt like I hadn't accomplished very much. I used to always say, like, I used to be a prodigy, and like, now what am I doing? But it's crazy how as you get older, you start to realize just how much you really don't fucking know. And the older you get, the more you start to see doors open for you that you couldn't have imagined before. You were like a younger, smaller person then and didn't really know what opportunities were yours. Or those opportunities weren't there yet. These things take time to manifest. But yeah, I think that we live in a world that really impresses upon us for some reason that we should know where we're going by the age of 30 or something. But it's just crazy, because say you do figure everything out by the time you're 30, then what do you do for the next potentially 50, 70 years of your life? What's the point? If you've already arrived, then what are you doing after that? You need to give your dreams time to form. They might not even really be there, but there's still plenty of time. I think that is the thing that is just like, it's hard to see, because you really, I think, on some level, you're just going to have to trust me on this, that like, I know how you feel about wanting to cross a finish line. That's like, once I have all these things, I'll be happy. That is not how the world works. Your life is not crossing finishing lines. Your life is how you get there, and the choices you make, and the people who are with you, and the way you feel about everything around you. Your life is those moments you spend on the couch watching Netflix. That's your life, just as much as like the day you spend graduating from your program or your wedding day or whatever. All of that is this, and I know that we build up this need to have things, prove success. It's great to always be looking forward, but you have to be accepting of what you have now and not trying to look for something that doesn't, you try to make something tangible that isn't. Because once you can see the forest through the trees, then you're just looking at a new forest. So yeah, how do you deal with uncertainty? You have to, I hate that I keep giving this answer because it feels so cliche, but you have to like have a sense of hope and like faith that there's something out there that you haven't even thought of yet, that's yours, that's got your name on it, and you just don't even know yet. Something great, someone great, many great things and people and unexpected outcomes. Everything that happens to you that is totally unexpected is probably going to be way better than anything you could have planned. We are small beings with small imaginations, and we cannot possibly imagine how life actually feels. Those exciting moments, those moments when you feel totally happy and free, you never see them coming. So you have to just kind of trust that you don't always predict things the way they're going to be. And sometimes that means they turn out better. Sometimes they turn out worse. But you get through those times and you still have, like, seriously, a long time, like a long life. You don't have to accomplish things by the time you're 30, by the time you're 40 or whatever. Life doesn't just like, it's not over till it's over. And until then, you just keep going. And you keep getting to feel sort of amazed by things and by people and by the way that you can be amazed. It's funny because part of that like satisfaction is something that really only happens with time. Not even with events. Like, things won't happen to you to like prove anything. Like, something that you've waited for, finding the love of your life is not going to prove anything about you. It's just going to be something that you get to have. And I hope that makes sense. You think that like having this career success is going to be the proof that I need that I'm worth something, or that I found my way in life, or that I found what I mean to the world. And it's never going to feel like that. You don't really get that kind of certainty in life unless you choose it. So, yeah. Life is long. 4 years is a long time to be wondering if I was doing the right thing or making the right choices and the right calls. And it felt really selfish a lot of the time, and really stupid a lot of the time. But that's just part of the fun. Yeah, so happy Halloween. Please be safe. Please wear a mask. / don't do any Halloween things, but, also wear a mask. But anyway, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.